So strategies in negotiation. Negotiation is a basic business skill. Those of you that are Florida contractors had to take like contract law and business law and all these different things to pass your exam, but we don't always spend enough time just talking about straight negotiation skills. Last year I was in a program, I was studying at Harvard, I was working on a certification for strategic leadership. And in that program, you get to pick your classes. So one of the classes that I chose was a negotiation class because I like negotiation. I thought, oh, this is great, I'll learn something, I'll like it, it'll be fun. And so I took this negotiation class, and the way that it worked was we had students from around the world, all over the world. And so we would learn a few topics, and then they would pair us up, and we'd have to do a negotiation. So the very first negotiation was a single-level negotiation with straight price. This is the type of negotiation that a lot of people think of when they think of negotiation. You want to pay a price, someone else wants to charge you a different price. That's a straight level, one-level negotiation. And as we went through this class, and Harvard is the benchmark in negotiation strategies. Like, they're the ones that everyone goes to when they want to know about how to negotiate better. So the next level up is a two-level negotiation. Maybe it's price and timing, like when do you want it done? And then it keeps going to different levels, and sometimes our final negotiation was a four-level negotiation. So I'm taking this class, and I'm taking it just for myself, not thinking I was going to cover this topic today. First negotiation comes by, we go through it, it's a pricing negotiation, it feels great. At the end of the negotiation, we all have to analyze each other and say whether the other person covered the things that we'd covered in the class, and we got a score. Did great, felt good, I was like, yep, I'm a good negotiator, I know what I'm doing. Next negotiation comes by, next level up, very simple, two-level. Oh, and while I'm talking about it, let's turn off our phones, because I almost forgot to turn off mine. Second level negotiation, they pair me with a guy, he's out of Poland, and these are all on Zoom, these are Zoom negotiations. I get into the negotiation, literally 60 seconds into the negotiation, I start feeling my hands sweat. I start feeling my heart pound. I realize that I am negotiating with a totally different level negotiator than I've ever negotiated with in my life. And he's sitting back like a Cheshire cat, and he is excited to be negotiating. So we start the negotiation. The way it works in the class is we get a list of criteria of what we have to do. It says, I want to sell the space at this level. I don't want to give this up, like different rules of what I'm trying to accomplish. Then he has his list of rules of what he's trying to accomplish, what he's willing to pay, what he's willing to do. So we both come into this negotiation not knowing the other person's side, just like a regular negotiation would be. I'm in, and I'm thinking, I'm in trouble. Like, I literally, I was like in fight or flight. Like, I was like, this guy is gonna eat my lunch. Like, he is gonna wipe me out. So I start going through my notes because it's Zoom, and I'm going through some things, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna stand strong. So I start getting a little tougher, and I'm gonna hold the line. And as I'm holding the line, he just kind of smiles, and he's kind of real friendly. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna fight for it. And we had a time frame that we had to negotiate by. Sunday at noon was our time frame. We were down to the last 2 days or the last day. And what happened was my negotiation had a time limit. I think that often many people have been in a negotiation where there is a time limit. So I knew that I had till noon on Sunday. And so it was now or never. I was gonna have to walk away. And what I learned about myself in that negotiation is I don't like to walk away from a deal. I want to make a deal. So at the very last minute, when we're running out of time, because we had decided we would negotiate for about an hour, hour and a half, I start looking at the time, and I start giving in things because I want to make a deal. I make the deal. I try to hold the line as hard as possible. I don't feel great about it, but I don't feel bad about it either. I think that I kind of probably I was one of the better negotiators with this guy. At the very end, he says to me, would you mind showing me your cheat sheet? And I'll show you my cheat sheet so we can see how we did. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do that. And the minute that I saw his cheat sheet, I felt like the heat rising to my face because he cleaned my clock. He was such a good negotiator that he cleaned my clock. And I said to him, can I ask what you do for a living? And he goes, I'm a negotiator. I'm a litigator. So he was a litigator in Poland. I was like, okay. I go, well, this was kind of an unfair thing. He goes, no, that's not why I'm a good negotiator. He says, I'm a good negotiator because I love negotiating. He goes, I'm taking this class. He goes, are you getting the certification? I go, yeah. He goes, so you took the class for the certification? I go, yeah. He goes, I just took the class because I take every class I could possibly take on negotiation so I could keep getting better and better. And when he told me that, I was like, whoa, like I am dealing with like a professional here. And he was. I mean, he got everything. He squeezed every little tiny drop from me of what I was willing to give up. And what I thought of when I was doing that is I thought, how many of you are in business or in life and go into a meeting thinking that you're like going to do pretty well, and then somebody might clean your clock? And I thought, the things I'm learning here are things I want to bring back to our customers because I thought they were such valuable lessons. Some of you might be thinking like, okay, well, that's great for the business owners. How many of you are business owners here? Okay, so there's a large percentage. But then there's those of you that are like, and one of my team members said, Belynda, great topic, great idea, but you know, there's people out there that are like not business owners. They don't see themselves going into high stakes negotiation. How is this relevant to them? And it really occurred to me, I have a friend, and she's going through a very scary medical crisis. She goes to her doctor, and it's one of these insurance policies where your doctor has to approve you to go get an MRI or approve you to go get something else. Every one of us goes to doctors, right? And we have to negotiate for what we want. And my friend was not able to negotiate with the doctor to agree to sign the paper to get the MRI that she needs. And that really occurred to me, like, we're always negotiating. Some of the top negotiators that teach this topic say that the average person, whether a business person or not, negotiates an average of 3 times per day. So it is really relevant to all of us. So what is a negotiation? When we think of negotiation, we think of those high-stakes negotiations that I was talking about previously. But a negotiation is just the process of discussing something with someone in order to reach an agreement with them. So there's all kinds of negotiations that are happening. How we settle differences, how we reach agreement. And you need to understand how often you're doing this. When we learn how to negotiate, we gain confidence. After that guy humiliated me, even though it was just the 2 of us, I felt like the whole world could see. I told myself that will never happen again in this class. I'm going to study. I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to make sure I show up. And I had so much confidence in the next 2 negotiations we had to do, and I'll tell you a little bit about the final negotiation we had. So it gave me confidence. There's nothing worse than going into something and having a knot in your stomach. And how many of you have had formal negotiation training? Raise your hand. Really rare. And yet we're doing it all the time. So who do we negotiate with on a daily basis? Suppliers, vendors, customers, right? We're negotiating something with a customer, coworkers, employees, bosses, or even car dealers. Hopefully not on a regular basis, right? How many of you buy cars, right? Everyone in here. How many of you have rental agreements? So we're always in these negotiations. And I go so far as to say, and actually some of the master negotiators talk about, some of the hardest negotiations are with your own kids, right? Your teenager. You're negotiating with your teenager. And some of the skills here, some of the top negotiators say that they use in their own parenting. So the old school way of negotiation is, we're going to win at all costs. It's a zero-sum game. Someone's going to walk out the winner. Someone's going to walk out the loser. And it's kind of like war. We're going to like gird ourselves. I know a guy that every time he would negotiate, he'd wear a red shirt because he wanted to put them off their game and let them know that he was coming for business and to kind of intimidate them. That is a very old school version of negotiation. When I was preparing for this class, I wanted to go back to my old negotiation books because I'd read some books like, 25 years ago. And when I read the books, it was funny. All the things that they said to do, if you were to do those in negotiation today, it wouldn't go as far. There was a certain percentage that was still relevant, but it was all about like how to defeat your enemy, how to bring them down. Today, there's, the idea of win-win. Like everyone should win-win. And you ask yourself, well, how can we win-win, right? Like, how does that look? Because, everybody wants the same thing. They want the best deal. But what you learn is that different people value things differently. And so your job when you come to the negotiating table is to figure out what's important to the person so you can figure out a way to create value. Ideally, we're looking to build long-term relationships with the people that we negotiate with so we can come back there and we can have a relationship with them, and we can face them. I went into a negotiation years ago, and it's still with me. I was buying a car, didn't like that car, and I looked across the street, and there was a Lexus dealership. And I didn't think I could afford a Lexus, but I thought, let me just go look. I looked, and I fell in love with this car. And I had nothing to lose because I didn't think that I was going to get it. So I played hardball. And when I tell you I played hardball, I was like brutal with the guy. And we were going back and forth, and it was that old school negotiation. And sometimes in car dealerships, it can be like that. And I walked out with like an amazing deal, and I walked out with a Lexus. But I also walked out with a feeling that I had somehow done it in a not the best way. Because when we left, I could tell, and I didn't realize I negotiated this way, that the guy probably didn't get his money on the deal. And he was so upset with me, he couldn't even look at me. And it made me feel ashamed, frankly. Like, I didn't think about that part of it. I wasn't thinking about his feelings at that moment. I was just like, I'm going to get this Lexus, and I'm going to do it. And it always has stayed with me. And that's when I started reading books about negotiation, because I never wanted that feeling. You know, you want to leave where everyone can feel good about it. So there's a 5-step negotiation model. And the first step is to prepare. This is the fundamental step that most people don't do when they're going into negotiations. Often we find ourselves in negotiations and we're like surprised by it. You know, when my friend went into the doctor's office and you're trying to ask for something that you need, prepare for it. Have all your facts together. Know what you're doing. Have a sense of what you're doing. If you're going to buy a car, do your homework. Know how many car dealerships sell that. The last time I bought a car was the nicest experience that I ever had to buy a car. And the guy even said, wow, that was a really easy way to negotiate. So I had really grown up and I had really changed the way I did it. But I knew how many dealers did Mazdas. I knew how many Hondas. I knew the 2 cars I wanted. I knew what color I wanted. I knew everything before I walked in the door. And in the case of this negotiation, it was before this class, I actually went there at the end of the day when they were leaving and they were trying to close up, and I said, look, I'm going to buy a car. I'm going to buy it in 48 hours. I'm going to buy it like this. This is what I'm looking for. But I did my homework. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is build rapport. What does that mean, build rapport? Build a relationship. This is a human being that you're having a conversation with. Feel good about it. And you can say, well, you know, Belynda, I've been in a lot of negotiations. That's not how you show up. One of the guys that I'm going to talk about he did 150 international terrorist hostage negotiations. And this is his number 1 rule. When he's dealing with a terrorist, he says, build a relationship, because you're trying to get them to move. And you can't get someone to move their position if you don't have a relationship with them. And I don't know how many of you have watched The Negotiator. It was a movie like way back in the day with Samuel Jackson. I see a few heads. And in it, the very first thing that a negotiator always does is they call up the person and they say, hi, this is Belynda. I'm here to start talking to you. What's your name? They always start with a relationship. Yesterday, I was listening to a podcast about negotiation. It said that the reason that we study negotiation, or the FBI does, is because there was a shooting that took place in the 1970s. People were taking over airplanes and like trying to steal them. And so because they didn't have any negotiating skills, everybody ended up dead. And they were sued. The FBI was sued. And the judge said, you know what? You could have actually talked to them. You just showed up with the guns. And that actually shifted the way that the FBI deals with negotiations, because they lost so much money in this landmark case. So this is something that the FBI does. This is something business people do. And the guy I'll talk about in a little bit, he's actually a business negotiator now. He's a consultant for that. You want to explore this situation. What's actually happening? What are we negotiating? What matters to them? What matters to me? The next one is you need to create value. What you care about maybe isn't what they care about. And so you have to figure out like what's important to them, and then you want to close the deal. So when we talk about prepare, I talked about this a little bit, to research the other party. Sometimes, so if you're dealing with a general contractor, let's just use that example. How big are they? How many jobs do they do? Do they normally work in this area? Are they trying to break into this area? What's happening with them? The more information you can gather about the person that's going to sit on the other side, the more that you can know about them. And then if you sit with them and you actually know something about them, all of a sudden there's trust built. You cared enough to show up knowing something about them. So doing your homework is that. But doing your homework is also doing your homework for yourself. What does that mean? Map out possible issues. What could go wrong in this negotiation? Maybe you know that they never do this. You've heard from other people that they never do this. They don't pay on time. You need to know that. So you need to map that out. So when you go into that negotiation, you already have that built into your contract. Working on paper is what I didn't do before this class. And I've been in some high-level negotiations. And I told myself, that was so much easier when I put it down on paper. I mapped out all the possible scenarios. They call it tree mapping. So you say, this can happen, and if this happens, I'm going to do this. Then this can happen. If that happens, I'm going to do this. And if they ask me for this, I'm going to counteract with that. You think through the negotiation before you sit down. You figure out your best case scenario. What is it that in a perfect world, I was on the phone with a very high-level negotiation recently, and we're talking and we're working. I didn't actually know what it was they actually really wanted. We were exploring stuff, and I said, let me ask you something. If you had a pen and you could write the perfect deal and everything could be perfect for you, and we were the perfect partner, what would that look like for you? And the guy goes, whoa, the art of intention. I love that, Belynda. And I said, but what would that look like? He goes, you know what? I don't think our team's figured that out yet. I said, so here's what I recommend. I think that we're negotiating too early. How about you go back, you explore what it is you guys are trying to accomplish, and then let's talk about how we can accomplish this together. But this is what happens. Often we go into these negotiations, and we haven't yet figured out what success looks like for us. You want to walk in there going if I get this, this is it. This is the good stuff. So that you walk in with confidence. The reason that guy was so confident and smiling at me in the way that he was and so comfortable, because he knew what he wanted, and he knew what he was willing to walk away from if he didn't get it. See, he wasn't forcing himself to make a deal like I was. It was something in me that I was I need to make a deal. If I walk away from this, I'm going to feel like a failure because this is a negotiation class. I got to figure it out. And that's how I failed, because I didn't get my own needs met. So you want to know what your best case scenario is, and you want to figure out, this word always gets to me, what your BATNA is. So there's a lot of vocabulary words in this class, so I'll go over what that means. BATNA means best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What would happen if you walk away? When you know what's going to happen when you walk away, you feel more confident because you have other options. If you feel like this is your only option, scared money never wins, right? You go into the negotiation tense, people are reading your body language. What I knew when I was a sales rep is when I had to make numbers and I was scared I wasn't going to make it, I never made the deal. They knew I was scared. But when I walked in so comfortable, so confident, says, we'll figure this out. All of a sudden they're like, oh, she's doing really well. Maybe I should have their product. And all of a sudden the deals were so much easier. The importance of that is to know what your best alternative is. I went into a big negotiation with a big client back when I was a sales rep. And this deal could make or break me. And I was scared. And I realized I was totally dependent on this particular customer. And I sat down, actually, before I even knew about this, and I wrote down, okay, if I don't get this deal, what could I do to make up this much money? Because I was going to have a big hole in my business. What could I do? And I started mapping it out, writing it out. Oh, I could do this, and I could do this, and I could do this. I came up with 3 pages of things I could do that not only could make me the money that I was going to lose if I didn't get this deal, but actually make me triple the money that I was going to do. That moment, the next year, not only did I get that deal, I got all the other things I've written down. When I walked into that car dealership, it was a Mazda dealership. My daughter really liked the Mazda, but I told her, I'm not sure we're going to get you a Mazda. We'll see where I get the best deal. I told him, I would really like to do this deal with you. My daughter would really like the Mazda, but I actually have a number in mind. And we can get a Honda. I mean, that's another option. And I told him the model of the Honda, and I said, I know that they're selling one that's used over here. And it's not I'm not pressuring you. I'm just being honest with you. But me knowing what my best alternative to negotiate a deal was, he said to me, let's make this easy, Belynda. "What's your number?" I said, "Here's my number." He goes, "That's a number." I go, "I know. I'm not even saying it's fair, but I'm telling you that is my number." And he goes, "Let me see what I could do." He went in, he talked to, he goes, and I said, "I got to go," because it was end of day. I said, "Call me tomorrow, let me know what happens." He called me, he goes, "Guess what? I got the number." I said, "So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to come in Friday afternoon, because I got to work. I'll get there. What time do you close? 6 o'clock. I'll be there at 5:15. Have all the paperwork ready for me. Please, let's not play games with each other, because I will walk. Like, it's just going to waste your time to do all this work. Have it all ready to go, and I need it in writing from you that this number will work for you." And he goes, "Yeah." We did it. We were friends. Afterwards, it was such a great feeling, but I knew what my best alternative was to making that deal. So that's so important to do that preparation work before you show up. Build rapport. People want to help friends. People want to make a deal with people they like. One of the reasons that I think I gave in so much to that guy that was smiling was he was a really nice guy. So I wanted to do a deal with him. Like, I didn't want it to be about me. Like, I couldn't make the deal. He's a nice guy. It forced me to make concessions I didn't want to make. If you can make them like you, you're going to actually get better deals because you're trying to get them to move their position. People move for people that they like. Or, I don't know that like is the right word. Respect is probably a better word. So you need to build rapport. You're looking for a partner to help you solve a problem. One of the things they say in these negotiation classes, the person across the table from you isn't the problem. The person across the table from you is the partner that's going to help you solve the problem that's in front of you. And that's exactly what happened with that guy at the car dealership. He helped me solve my problem. My daughter wanted the Mazda. I knew what my best alternative thing was. We talked very nicely, ended up friends, built rapport, smiled. And I told him, if you can't get it, like, I'll still tell people about you because I think this is a great car. It just won't be right for us. It improves communication. I don't know if this is true, but I know that 20 years ago I was in a sales training, and they were teaching us about being too friendly with people because they'll take advantage of you, okay? And so they said that Walmart makes sure that their purchasers change positions every 45 days. So like if they're in charge of buying children's toys, 45 days later, they're in charge of bicycles. 45 days later, they're in charge of plants. The reason they did that is because they knew in negotiation, what's Walmart good at? Low prices. How do they get low prices? They're the best negotiators in the business. But you can't be a great negotiator and get the lowest price, maybe, if you're friends with the guy and you feel bad to ask him for too much money. So Walmart recognized that really quickly and didn't want their negotiators to be friends because they knew it was sticky and their negotiators would probably give up too much. So it just goes to show that this works in high-level business. It works in international hostage situations. It works building relationships with people. And then you want to be curious. You know, what is their story? How do they see the situation? And you want to communicate your position. Like, how do you see it? I'd really like to do that for you, I said to the guy. But here's where I'm at. My husband doesn't really want me to buy a car, but I really don't like this car that I have for my daughter. So like, in another day, if my husband's behind it, I would spend that money. But I can't spend the money because my husband doesn't really think that we need to be doing this. That's why this is my number. He agreed that if I got this number, he understands my position. He's more willing to negotiate with me, right? So you want to tell your story, but you want to be super curious about what is important to them. Because what happens is, your goal is to create value. You find out what's important to them. It's not always price. People seem to think that all negotiation is based on price, but it isn't. Sometimes it's on reputation. There's a great negotiator that works for the Smithsonian Museum. She gets people to give up all kinds of things because they want the prestige of saying that they sold a piece to the Smithsonian. They'll come in at $16 million for a piece, and by the time they leave, it's $3 million. She went from $16 million down to $3 million. Where did that $13 million go for? It's because the prestige, she figured out that the prestige of it is what's important to them. So you've got to explore the situation and what's a priority for them. So what does a win look like for them? What does a win look like for you? You want to work through sticky issues, and you want to look for the creative win. I told you that I had 4 levels of negotiation. My 4th level was my highest level. I'd been in the class for 7 weeks by that point. And I told you that they were international people. The person that they matched me with was a man from Saudi Arabia. Now, I'm a woman, and in Saudi Arabia, women weren't able to drive till 2018. So when I saw that this was who I was going to be a counterpart with, I thought, now this is going to be interesting for me because he probably doesn't negotiate a lot with women. Like, how is this even going to, probably at his level, they're still in a position where it's a different kind of culture. I mean, just culturally, you're negotiating different things. And I thought, Belynda, forget about all that. Forget about having preconceived notions of how he's going to show up and how he sees you, preconceived notions about what his life is like. Just show up and follow the model. I built rapport with him right at the very beginning. I talked a little bit about his country and was asking him some very curious, some questions. All of a sudden, he started relaxing. He started telling me, and at first, it was interesting because he wouldn't look directly at me at first, but I was so curious and asking about so what about this? So what about that? And in the negotiation, I was a hiring manager, and it was in 4 locations: Singapore, London, and I was told that I was supposed to get the guy to move to Singapore. But we were negotiating at 4 levels: location, whether they worked remotely or in-house, what we were going to pay them, and also what their benefits were going to be. So it was a very complex negotiation. But see, I was different this time. I didn't give myself a limit of 1 hour at the end. I gave myself 2 days. I also told myself that I was going to walk if I had to. We were negotiating, an hour was going by. We weren't really making headway, but we were building a relationship. And I said, you know what? What about if we come back tomorrow and we do this a little bit more? Because I think that we're kind of in an impasse. Why don't you think through what you want to do? I'll think through what I want to do. We came back the next day. We worked through it, and it was a really good deal. He was happy. I was happy. And then we had to do analysis of each other, and you get to read what people say about you. The number 2 guy actually called me out on all the things I did wrong. This guy wrote, that was actually one of the best negotiating experiences I've had. She hit all the marks. Here's some things she could work on, because our job is to help each other improve. But it was such an interesting position because I was listening for the value the whole time. He really wanted to live in a certain place. So I said, okay, well, if you live in this place, that's great, but then I'm going to have to give you this amount, and your benefits are going to be this amount. We need you in the office every single day. He said, well, I can't be in the office every single day. So we kept going back and forth, but we spent 2 days, and he could hear that I was willing to walk. So look for the creative wins sometimes. You're looking for something called the ZOPA. All negotiations, all deals happen in this space, the zone of possible agreement, which means here's what you're willing to do, and here's what they're willing to do. And I'm sure you've seen those Venn diagrams where the things kind of cross, and the area in the middle is where you actually meet. You're looking for that zone of possible agreement. And sometimes just because you know your business, you know what that zone of possible agreement is, but sometimes you don't know what that is. You're looking for mutual benefits. You want them to feel good. When they walk away, you want them to feel like, yeah, maybe I paid a little bit extra, but I feel pretty good about that. You're mapping out the areas of agreement. You want to keep notes as you're negotiating so you can keep track of what it is that they're saying, and you want them to talk. The more they talk, the more you understand them, and then you can speak their language. Oh, I see this is important to you, so maybe we could do this. Would this work for you? And they feel heard. People want to feel heard. So now you want to close the deal. Give me one quick minute. There were some things I want to cover. I want to make sure I didn't cover. You want to close the deal. You want to come to terms. It's super important for you to get everything in writing, right? How many times do things go south? How many of you had done deals and you spoke about it and then later on you didn't get it in writing? And you're like, yeah, we talked about that. And they're like, yeah, it's not in writing. It's not an agreement, right? You want to create space for adjustments. You want to follow up to make sure that all agreed items were executed. I have a sister. She's in the business in doing real estate, and she has rental units. And she was telling me a story that she has no problem collecting her money ever. And I was like, really? Because I feel like that would be really hard, like rental. Rental seems fine. She says, no, it's all in our contract and our negotiations at the front end. I tell them very clearly, If you are a day late, you will pay $75. And every day thereafter, you'll pay $5. And I tell them, and we will implement that. And then what happens is, sure enough, they'll tell me, hey, this happened, and that happened, and then this happened, and I didn't. And she says, that's okay, but it will be $75 and $5 each day. She says, it's very simple. That's the deal. That's what we agreed to. That's what's going to happen. And she says, it clears up so much confusion. And so, with our contracts, if we could just make it so clear, maybe we reward people for meeting certain milestones. We live in a neighborhood where there was a lot of building that was happening, and people would have their houses sitting there for 2 years, it just wouldn't get built. And then our neighbor got his house built in 8 months. And I said to him, I watch all these people, and they're not getting their houses built. And he goes, oh yeah, I built into the contract rewards. If they got this done by this date, I paid them extra. So they hit different milestones, they kept getting rewards. He goes, it cost me a little bit more, but in the end, it cost me less because I watched all these people sitting around with 2 years. He goes, I'm not going to do that. So think about in your contracts how you can build in rewards, and think about how you can build in punitive measures if they don't meet certain criteria. And don't be afraid of changing terms. Now, this is a tricky one. You're negotiating, you've been working at this a long time, you're tired, they're tired. It's stressful, right? These are difficult conversations. And so what happens is they say at the very last minute, you think you've got a deal, well, I don't know, I'm thinking this. You have to figure out whether that's them just blowing smoke at you so that they can get out of the deal, or whether they're actually signaling to you that they're ready to move forward with the deal. So when they say that, you say, are there any other issues that need to be resolved? If we can resolve this, are you ready to sign the contract? Because then you got them, right? You got them. It's ready to go. Or if they go, well, no. Okay, so why don't we get out all the deals? Let's not waste each other's time. Let's figure out what's the issue. Is there anything else that's happening? And so you say, if we resolve this, do we have the deal? If you're changing the terms at the last minute, and this is fair, you're in the middle of doing the negotiation, you're excited, and then something occurs to you that you're going to bring this back to your partner, and they're not going to be happy because of X, Y, Z. So right at the end where it looks like you've got a deal because you were comfortable with it, it occurs to you whoa, he might not like that. You say, I'm sorry. I want to be upfront with you and honest. I feel really good about the direction we're going, but I just realized that I've got to figure out X, Y, Z on my end before we can move forward on this. But is everything else good on your end? Yes, it is. I apologize. I didn't think this through. But now that I'm thinking about it, be honest with them, because negotiation is trust building. That's how you get it to the end. So, who is Chris Voss? Chris Voss is a former FBI lead negotiator. He dealt with 100 international hostage negotiations. He helped build out the Harvard curriculum, and he is the CEO of Black Swan Group. And what Black Swan Group is? World-class negotiations. When large companies are trying to train their teams on how to be good negotiators, they bring in Chris Voss. I watched Chris Voss's masterclass. I don't know how many of you have heard of masterclass, but you've got the seminar handouts page, the mikeholt.com/seminar handouts. I put a link to Chris Voss's class on that page. Masterclass has these specials where you can get it for $99 for a year or something. I would say that those of you that ever negotiate, it is the best money you'll ever spend. Chris Voss is amazing, and it's about a 12-hour master class on all of his techniques that he's learned over the years. So I wanted to let you know that that's there. Chris Voss has certain techniques that he wants to make sure that you know about. The first thing he talks about is tactical empathy. He said, I don't care who I'm dealing with. I don't care if I'm dealing with a guy that's in a bank and he's got 5 people as hostages. He says, I show up with empathy. He says, what does that mean? He goes, it doesn't mean that I agree with them. It means I'm trying to understand them. I'm trying to understand their side. Okay, it's good there. It's not good on my screen. I'm trying to understand their side. What's important to them? What game are they actually playing? Why did this guy decide to hold up this bank on this day? What's happening in his life? Why does he feel justified in doing what he's doing? He says criminals are a funny animal, even terrorists. They somehow justify to themselves what it is they're doing, that it's right what they're doing. So it's my job to figure out what game are they playing and what rules are they playing by. Once I know that, he says, then I know how to move the pieces in order to win the game. Because they're not going to play the game I'm playing, right? They're going to play their game. They've convinced themselves that they are right. So I have to spend my time in this negotiation figuring out what game are they playing and why are they playing it. He tells a story of a guy who drove his tractor and he was wrapped in like bombs and drove to the memorial in D.C. And the guy was like, I'm going to blow everyone up. And there was people there. I'm going to kill everybody. And they were in negotiation with this guy. And he's trying to do this tactical empathy. What game is this guy playing? Why does this guy think it's okay? And meanwhile, they're doing background information. Who is this guy? What property does he own? And they found out that his family farm was like going out of business and he hadn't gotten a loan and he was in a really bad position. So now they know information about him. And he's negotiating with the guy. And the guy's very religious. And the guy's like, and then Jesus said, and then this happened, and this is, so he said, okay. He thinks that he's been like ordained by God to do this. I got to figure out a way to get him to give up without anybody getting killed based on his rules of how he plays this game. So they sat and they did some mapping out, like, how about if we approached it like this? How about, and one of the ladies that was a negotiator says, you know what I think might work? And she found some proverb or whatever, and because the guy knew the Bible so well, she goes, if we were to say that on this day this happened and we could connect it religiously, because the guy had started to show that he wanted to back down. He realized it had been going on for 2 days now and no one did anything, no one moved in, they just kept letting this guy go a little wacky. And they said to him, he goes, nope, I'm not leaving for how many days? And they said, you know, in the Bible, and you're a religious man, it said that they changed on the third day. And the third day is actually today. It wasn't 100%, but they found a way to couch it for him to just give up. They said it would be really good if we could just like all go home. We could all just figure this out. And the guy goes, yeah, I think that you're right about that. And he gave up. Nobody was killed. Obviously, he paid the price. But the truth is, he didn't really want to blow himself up, and he didn't want to blow anyone else up. He was a frustrated individual trying to act out because he felt frustrated by life. So make sure that you try not to judge the person. You don't know what their reasons are, and get them talking about their goals. So that's what tactical empathy is. This one's an interesting one. This one's called mirroring. And this one actually feels like it could upset people, but he said it's one of the most effective techniques that there actually is. So someone tells you something, says, yeah, I'd really like to do this, but, you know, I can't because we're really tapped out. He says you repeat the last 2 to 3 words that they say. So you'd like to move forward, you're tapped out? Yeah, I'm tapped out because there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things going on in my life. Going on in your life?
No, I'm saying that's your response. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. Well, no, he says you keep asking. You want to keep going. You want to keep mirroring what they're saying, the last 3 words. So he uses the example of, I like this one. I can't pay this. Your price is way too high. And he goes, you say, too high? Yeah, too high. Your price is out of control. Listen, wait, let me see. I want to say it exactly. For goodness sakes, we have a limited budget. We can't just pay anything. Limited budget? Yeah, we have a limited budget. I mean, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're expanding, we're going into other countries. I mean, you're going to other countries? By continuously mirroring, you keep getting them talking. And then it starts opening up. And then you're like, wow, that's a lot of things to have happen. It makes it easier to close the deal later on because you know so much about the client. So that's called mirroring. And they feel listened to and valued. And you're right, Scott. At the end, you could say, that's what I'm here. Let's try to solve this together. You're there to solve it together. And this one's another interesting one. He said that when they did the research on labeling, they didn't expect it to be as effective as it was. But I realized I haven't labeled in situations, and it's hurt me. Labeling means that you say the emotions that you see. I'm sure you've been working with someone, maybe you have an employee, or maybe you have a colleague or a peer, a partner. And every time you talk to the partner, they're all like, well, da-da-da-da, and they're all grumpy or sarcastic or frustrated, and something's going on. We had a client that came in to this event and would tell us like how every time he talked to his partner, he was just so rude to him. But what did he do? Did he confront him? Did he ask the partner? No, he was afraid to. So you know what he did? He tiptoed around the problem all the time. He never called the elephant in the room the elephant in the room. Chris Voss says, you've got to call out what you're seeing emotionally happening on the other side. Now, it doesn't help if you go, well, you look angry, because that's not compassionate or empathetic. What you want to say is you say, it feels like you're frustrated. It seems like something about the way we're going with this negotiation is making you uncomfortable. What is it? And they've actually been tracking like people's brains when they do this. The minute that an emotion is labeled, the emotion starts to come down. It's like someone's pulling cool water on it. So actually, I've been doing this in my personal life. I used to never, like if someone was frustrated or cranky, I'd be like, okay, I'm just gonna like give them their space. But now I don't do that because they're acting that way because they want you to know that something's bothering them. I always thought I should give them like a little more space. It seems like, it feels like, from my point of view, it just seems like you're upset, or it seems like you're scared, or it seems like this is too much for you. What's going on? You don't want to say, let me see, they said a word. What I'm hearing from you is that you're angry. That feels judgmental. At every point, you want to be empathetic, and you want to help walk this person through what it is they're feeling so that they can share it with you so you two can solve this problem. So that is called labeling. And this builds trust, which is one of the most useful tools that you can use. The next thing is calibrated questions. Helps you elicit information. Helps you guide the conversation, right? Someone says to you, hey, I need you to, you've worked with this contractor before, okay? And they weren't very good at paying on time. And they want you to do it. And you're afraid to not do it because maybe they've got a lot of power in the industry and you just don't want to be on their bad side or whatever it is. If someone were to say to you, hey, I need you to do this, the thing you would ask them is, how am I supposed to do that? With a curious like tone, like, how am I supposed to do that? The last 2 times we worked together, it was hard to get paid on time. I can't afford to keep doing business and not get paid. Not because, listen, if I could, I would. If I didn't need to get paid on time, I would do it, right? That takes all the pressure off. But how am I supposed to do that? He does like live negotiation training with people and has them call customers that have been problems. And the people are like, I could never say that to the person. He says, do it. And every time, because people are fair fundamentally, they're like, you're right. I haven't paid you on time. I'm sorry. Last year we were going through this. It has been resolved. I really do want to work with you again. But you wouldn't know that they'd been going through that if you didn't say, how am I supposed to do that? What is the biggest challenge you're facing? You're constantly trying to gather information so you could figure out what's important to them so you could do a good deal. Another important thing is anchoring. Who is the person that sets the tone? Do you start low? Do you start high? If you start high, you run the risk of what? Someone walking away and being like, this is ridiculous. You don't even have respect for me. So anchoring is a hard thing to do. The research shows that whatever the first number is basically where it goes. So if you go low, you're not going to ever move up. If you go too high, you could lose them. They said the only time you should be the first person to say the number is if you know the zone of possible agreement. You kind of have a general sense, then start high. So you can test where you're at. You kind of have a good sense to like put your finger to the wind and figure that out. So that's who starts the position. Now, let's say that they start the position and their position is like I'll pay you X, Y, Z. And it's so ridiculous. And now you're scared because you know that the first person that does anchoring. So I've been actually researching this. And last night I found out what you should do because I was like, I want to have a solution to this. And here's what it says. I love this. They come up with a ridiculous number, and you go, okay, can you walk me through how you came up with that number? Just, could you walk me through that? Because what happens is what? If they're just trying to scam you and like pull the wool over your eyes, you've just called them out on it. If they're maybe telling you something and they thought that the job was this, but you're actually knowing it's this, you understand the variance. But you're also putting them on notice. And as they're describing it and they're hearing themselves, and if it's a ridiculous number, they're going to hear it. And then they're going to start backtracking, going, well, I didn't think about that aspect of it. Now that we're talking about it, I actually would go to this number. So it forces you to hold the upper hand. So that's how you handle that with anchoring. Location. You want the other party to be comfortable. You've got your tools. You know how to negotiate. You could negotiate anywhere. So negotiate where they feel comfortable, whether it's a neutral location or in their spots. Sometimes people say, take it or leave it. That's my best offer. He says, don't fall for the bait. Chris says, that's not their best offer. They're just like trying to pressure you, trying to do different things. Maybe they're trying to create a sense of urgency. You know what he says to do when they say take it or leave it? It's my last offer. He says, pretend like you didn't hear it. Just keep talking about the issues. Like it didn't even register. Just keep talking about the issues. And they say, well, take it or leave it. I mean, you could say, it feels like you're feeling a little bit of tension about this. It seems like this, you start labeling what they're acting like, right? And then you get them to calm down and you gather more information and you keep the negotiation going. And sometimes he says if they say it 3 times, then you know you're really dealing with a final offer. And you go, so you're saying that this really is your final offer. So you want to just keep exploring all that. You want to close with empathy. This is the most critical part of the negotiation. What that guy did to me wasn't really the way to do it, right? He was gloating. He was so proud of himself that he had taken advantage of me. But do I ever want to deal with that person again? Would I ever, and he was a nice guy, but do I ever want to negotiate with him again? Absolutely not. So if you get a good deal, never a good thing to show how proud you are of what a good deal you got. Let them feel like they got the win. Let them feel like they're walking through with that. When you're closing the deal, what about this offer works for them? How would they like to proceed from here? What concerns do they have? You summarize the key points. Be prepared to walk away.